Welcome to the Feeling Better podcast. My name is Maria, and I'm the host of this podcast, former gambling addict and devoted Christian homesteading wife. I'm also the author of the Feeling Better 10-4 program that teaches you a practical, effective, inspirational 10-week program to help you overcome your compulsive gambling addiction, which you can listen to in the first 15 episodes of my podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Oh, today's episode is going to be a doozy. I say that because this particular imbalance that I'll call the imbalance of wanting bigger barns is, I think, by far, the one most of us struggle with. Maybe even all of us in some form or fashion. I'll explain that title in a moment, although I'm sure some of you already know where I'm going with this. But first, in case you're wondering, I'm still hanging in there smoke-free. It has been 9 days as of recording this, and it has been ridiculously difficult. Now, I know people quit smoking all the time, even those who've smoked for decades like me. Still, some days, or most days, are really hard. I know, like everything else, it will get easier the more time that goes by. I've moved on from the patches to chewing nicotine gum or nicotine mints when I feel the urge. But I don't even think it's about the nicotine at this point. It's a mental thing with all the other stuff that was a part of my smoking habit. I'll talk more about that later, though, because it's got to point to today's topic. So let me start this with a specific example. I've got this podcast. I absolutely love it, and I so enjoy doing it every week. Yet, unfortunately, I struggle weekly with some aspects of it. You probably already know that I script and type out every episode. I'm not a just sit there and freeform talk into the mic kind of gal. I mean, I'm capable, but that's not my true gift, and I know that. You know how the Bible tells us that everyone has spiritual gifts? Some might have the gift of singing or cooking or parenting or coaching or teaching or building things or whatever it might be. I like to think sometimes that I have the gift of homemaking and homesteading because I really enjoy it. You know, things like cooking and home decor and keeping a house and growing a garden and all of those things. But while I'm good at that and enjoy it, it's not my gift. I know this because a gift is something you're really good at in an effortless way and always have been since you were young, and that you own in a very unique, almost supernatural kind of manner. Like, if your gift is building things, then you started building things at a young age, and it came naturally to you, and you amaze others with your natural ability. The way something should be built or constructed just comes so easy to you in a manner that goes way above mere talent. The same thing with somebody whose gift is singing. Now, I love to sing, but it's not my gift. I don't have a great voice. It's okay, but not great. And although I can read music, I don't have the range required to be a truly spectacular singer. I always wanted to be a mother, and I'm sure I would have been a great mom, but that wasn't my gift either. I adore kids, but I don't have that easygoing way and overflowing adoration for babies and kids the way some women do, with a gift for calming a crying baby or enchanting a small child. You see what I'm saying? If you don't know what your gift is, I urge you to really explore that, because it'll make such a difference in your life and be so fulfilling, not only for yourself, but for God's kingdom too. Spend some time reflecting on what you love to do and what you're naturally exceptional at. It might be something as simple as just meeting new people, making them feel welcome. Hospitality is absolutely a gift. I'll explore spiritual gifts more in another episode because I could talk about that all day. But you know me, I don't want to get off track. At the core of who I am, God gave me a couple of gifts in my life. One is the gift of reading and writing. The other is the gift of speaking. Ironically, that all came from my mother. My mom had one of those pleasant, genuine phone voices, meaning she just sounded really clear and sweet and personable when you talked to her on the phone. Everyone said so. I remember many people saying to my mother, "You just have such a pleasant, sweet phone voice." When I was in my 20s working as a customer service rep, I was more than startled when one of my customers said that to me in the same way. I suppose that's one of the reasons why I ended up in sales. I just enjoyed talking to people, and I had a way of being able to soothe and calm even the most agitated customer. As I grew comfortable in the role of sales, I listened to others around me and how they talked to their customers. They were aggressive and pushy and disengaged, obviously going for the hard sell. I knew that I did not want to be like that. Those were real people on the other end of the phone. If it were me, I didn't want the hard sell. That's when, before I had any formal training, I decided that I wanted to be a sales rep that cared about my customers and let them know it. I enjoyed asking about how their vacation went, or how their mother was doing, or what plans they had for the weekend. I got to know them, and even though I'd never met them or seen what they looked like, they trusted me. And for some reason, this was something that others found to be a bit unorthodox, or maybe even surprising. Like one time, I was in Boston at a sales meeting for this company I worked for. Harvard University was one of my customers, and my buyer there had a great relationship with me. I really loved talking to her. And as I was sitting around the conference table at this meeting with my boss and coworkers taking a little break, my cell phone rang. It was my customer from Harvard. "Hey," I said to her, "welcome back. How was the wedding? Did you guys have great weather? You know, I want to see pictures. How did the dog do? Did she behave going up the aisle or did she freak out?" My customer laughed at the other end. "That's why I'm calling. I only have a quick second before I have to head into a meeting, but I sent you an email with some photos. The weather was perfect, and Roxy was amazing. I'll call you later in the week for business stuff, but I wanted you to see some pictures. Check out how gorgeous my daughter's dress was." We said a quick goodbye, and I disconnected the call, waking my laptop up so I could go into my email and check out the photos she sent. Everyone around me was silent, and finally my boss piped up. "That wasn't Jane from Harvard, was it?" I'm not using her real name there. I nodded. "Yeah, I told you guys she was gone for 2 weeks for her daughter's wedding in Florida. She just sent me pictures." He shook his head. "How? I couldn't even get her to do lunch with me, and she's been a cold fish to everyone else in this company. But she sent you pictures of her family the first day she's back at work?" But that's just how it was. I'd never met her in person, but I connected with her over the phone and became good friends with her. When I was very young, just 4 years old, my mother taught me how to read. This was back in the day when parents actually played a part in their child's education. She'd sit me down every day and go through a phonics book with me, teaching me the alphabet and how to sound out letters. To this day, I'm so thankful for that because she ensured that I became a confident, adept reader. By the time I was in the first grade, I was reading full chapter books like Little House on the Prairie. I loved to read. I always geeked out in class when we had to take turns reading out loud. I always felt so badly for those kids who struggled with reading and who didn't know how to sound out the words well and who weren't confident in reading out loud in front of the class. I fell in love with words and also fell in love with writing them. Over the years, I read voraciously and enjoyed reading out loud. When I was in my mid-30s, I spent some time as a nanny to 2 preteen girls who'd lost their mom to cancer. Their dad took off and moved to another state, so their aunt got custody of them. They lived in the same condo complex that I did, and when I found out she was looking for someone to watch them a few days a week, pick them up from school, make them dinner, and help them with their homework, I eagerly applied. We all hit it off instantly, and I quickly became an important part of their family. The girls obviously had some mental trauma, but their aunt had done an incredible job of making them feel loved and cared for. She tried to get them into reading more, buying them books like the Twilight Saga, which I thought was garbage. They were too young for that, and I wanted them to be exposed to more wholesome content. So I bought a couple of American Girl books that had stories about fictional girls from various periods in history, and I began reading to them. Every night before bed, I'd sit on the bedroom floor and read to them. Anyway, I'm getting totally sidetracked here, but my point is, I'm so ridiculously thrilled that I'm finally able to use the gifts that God has bestowed upon me from a young age, writing and reading out loud. I hadn't even truly realized those were my gifts until this year. This podcast has been such an amazing blessing, more than I ever thought it would be. It's absolutely fulfilling, and I enjoy all the time that I spend writing it out and recording it every week. But admittedly, it's also a cumbersome pain in the rear end for two reasons. One is that I have an old 2017 MacBook Pro laptop. I've always been a Mac girl, and my laptop is now going on 7 years old. I use it heavily, every single day, for hours every day, for both personal and work. And the keyboard is seriously a hot mess. Apparently, that particular year and model is known for having a janky keyboard, and it's not cheap to have it fixed. We don't have an Apple store anywhere near us. I think the closest one is about 3 hours away, so I would have to send it in to be fixed, and I just can't be without it. I use it for everything from contract work to paying bills to writing out and recording my podcast. Several of my keys have popped off completely and are no longer attached. A couple of others are permanently stuck and won't type properly. I've designated a little area of my living room as my home office with a folding plastic outdoor table as my desk. And my office chair is almost 20 years old and all misshapen and not very comfortable. We don't have an extra bedroom to convert to an office in this farmhouse. So I had fully intended, right about the time when I started gambling, to turn our shed into a she-shed office/recording studio where I could have some privacy. Right before I gambled all of our money away, I had begun hashing out an affordable way to upgrade my work situation. Hire a handyman guy to insulate and drywall the shed, maybe even run electric to it so I could have heat in the winter. Then I would put up some shelving, buy a new desk and chair, maybe some sound insulating foam panels for podcasting, and, of course, upgrade my laptop. But then I got hooked on casino slot games, and you know the rest. That plan completely fell apart. Back in the fall, my MacBook keyboard got so bad that I wasn't able to type anymore. We had a friend who graciously gave me a USB keyboard that I have plugged in using a dongle, as well as a mouse. It works just fine, of course, but I was no longer able to sit outside with my laptop and write, which was something I really loved to do. Nor could I take my laptop in the bedroom if I wanted some peace and quiet away from my husband, or to just sprawl out in a comfy position in my recliner. Because I have the keyboard attached and now have to use a mouse, I'm stuck in this old, uncomfortable chair, writing at a plastic resin table, using an external keyboard from the early 2000s. And when I need to record an episode, I send my hubby with the cats into the bedroom so I have a little bit of quiet around me. The second reason why this is so cumbersome is because writing each episode is about 14 or 15 pages worth of words. And at this point, my podcast is really meaty, meaning each episode is kind of like its own little Bible study. I really do my best to be in the Spirit, to let God guide my words. I love to pore over the scripture and do some Googling and sit and think about my own experiences and stories and examples of how to best convey each topic. And when I get in the zone, it's freaking awesome. The words just flow with inspiration and emotion, and I love every single moment of it. But it's not easy to get in the zone or stay in the zone because 10 feet away from me, my hubby sits on our couch working on his laptop. We both work from home and we both work on our computers. And my husband is a talker. Sometimes he gets in the zone too, but he tends to make and receive a lot of phone calls. He's not only a talker that can spend an hour on the phone with a client, but he's also loud. He's one of those guys whose natural talking voice is everyone else's yelling voice. I've given up trying to tell him to use his indoor voice because I honestly don't think he has an indoor voice. Plus, he's got this quirky characteristic where he just talks out loud to himself. And in between all his rambling, he'll often throw some question or comment at me, which knocks me out of my zone. We have a small house with only a living room, dining room, kitchen, and one bedroom. So a frequent scene that happens at least a dozen times a day is something like this, which literally just occurred about 20 minutes ago. I'm in the living room at my makeshift desk, typing away this episode, putting the finishing touches on it, when my husband starts muttering, "Why is my email doing this? What is this box that popped up?" At this point, I make a mental effort to ignore him and not pay any attention to him, but inwardly I'm thinking to myself, "Come on, babe, just figure it out. You can do it." He's pretty good at troubleshooting stuff, but he also knows that I'm better at it. But next he says, "Why does Gmail have to be so unintuitive?" So at this point, I know how it's going to go, but I'm holding out one small thread of hope, although my train of thought has already been broken. I was just working on this draft and now it's disappeared. Where did it go? And I've got this stupid box that popped up. And of course, it's not letting me close it out. It's at this point I lean back and sigh, trying really hard not to roll my eyes, realizing it's pointless to continue writing. I know the poor guy is legitimately frustrated, and I know what's coming next. Just as I push away from my desk, prepared to get up and help him, he asks me, "Can you please come here and help me with this? I don't know what happened." So I get up, and with all the patience in the world, go over and help him close out the dictation box that somehow he enabled, and help him retrieve his email draft. A moment later, I'm back at my desk, searching through BibleGateway.com for the verse I know I want to reference. I only vaguely register that he's gone into the kitchen, presumably to grab a bite to eat. But then I hear, "Where's the maple syrup? I left it out on the counter this morning when I ate those leftover pancakes. Are there any pancakes left? I know I didn't eat them all." "Yes, there are 3 of them left. I put them in the fridge when I cleaned up earlier," I hollered at him. "But where's the maple syrup?" he hollers back. My hubby, bless his heart, loves to leave things out on the kitchen counters for when he needs them. He's got a one-track brain and likes to have everything out in the open within easy reach. Me, I prefer to put things away. We don't have any upper cabinets in our kitchen, only shelves. So we only use the cabinet space for dishes, pots, and pans. All of the food is stored in the pantry. A logical person would surmise that if he had syrup on the counter, and I just told him that I cleaned, the most likely place to find it would be in the pantry. Since I'm cigarette-free and feeling a little crispy around the edges these days, I remain silent, waiting to see if he'll be logical. Nope. "Honey," he calls out from the kitchen, "where is the maple syrup?" I sigh, and then I think, is smoking really so bad? And then I yell out, "It's in the garage, in your toolbox, next to the screwdriver set." He finally pokes his head into the living room and looks at me confused. "What? Why in the world would you put the maple syrup out in the garage?" This time, I actually do roll my eyes. "Honey, it's not out in the garage. I'm just messing with you. If it was on the counter earlier and I told you I cleaned the kitchen, where do you think the maple syrup is?" I asked him with the patience of a saint. "In the pantry?" I nod at him. Gold star for my hubby. "But it's not in there. I already looked." Oh no, not this. The man's idea of looking is not really looking. Let's just face it. I swear, sometimes I think there must be some kind of male pattern blindness condition out there that's far more prevalent than male pattern baldness. Because my guy can't ever find anything, even if his loving wifey ensures that all the things he uses the most are always put in the same place and always easily visible. So I get up from my desk, shuffle into the kitchen, and make my way around the corner to the walk-in pantry. The moment I open the door and flick on the light, I spot the big half-gallon glass jug of real local maple syrup that I bought at the farmer's market last summer. It's sitting on the shelf right up front, next to my other syrups, extracts, and sweeteners. As my mother said, if it were alive, it would have bit him. Well, I didn't look over there. Wouldn't it make more sense to keep it with the pancake mix since they go together? My hubs asked, indicating a totally different shelf where I keep my baking mixes and flour. No, I retorted, only to a man. No joke. The moment I sat back down at my desk and reread the last sentence that I wrote, I heard my hubby say in a loud voice, "Hey man, I had you on my list to call today. Sorry, I've just been busy. How's it going?" I sank back in my chair. He got a phone call, and I knew by the tone of the conversation that it wasn't going to be a short one. I also knew it was pointless to continue writing. Sure enough, within a few minutes, my husband was shouting into the phone, animatedly giving his feedback about whatever it was they were talking about. Resigned to the fact that I wasn't going to be able to concentrate for the next several minutes, I decided to go onto Facebook and check out my news feed, maybe see what was recently posted on our church page. Often, they'll post prayer requests or other news on there. On my news feed was a post from my friend Melissa, who is my age and also works out of her home, although she's in a different industry than I am. Her post showed a picture of a packed lunchbox with a deluxe BLT sandwich, a thermos of soup, some homemade crackers, a muffin, and a few other treats. It said something like, "It's an honor and pleasure to get up every morning and make lunch for my husband for his long day at work." Wow. I stared at that photo like it was the holy grail that held all the secrets to a happy marriage. Her husband went off to work every day, leaving her at home to do her work. Admittedly, telling the truth to you all because I'm honest now, I was a teeny bit envious of that. Don't get me wrong, I adore my hubby and we get along wonderfully. There's a whole massive pile of love between us. But I don't care how strong your marriage is or how well you get along. Having a couple working and living side by side 24/7 with each other will test the strength of any marriage. Wow, imagine how much I could get done in my day if I had some alone time, I thought to myself. Think how clean the house would be all the time, and how inspirational and in-depth my Bible studies and podcast episodes would be. I daydreamed about what that might look like as I continued to scroll. In one of my Christian groups, I saw a woman who posted a picture of her prayer closet. She had turned the spare bedroom walk-in closet into a prayer room, with cutout pictures of Bible verses and handwritten prayer requests, with pillows and flameless candles, decorating it into a serene chapel of sorts. Wow, it was so beautiful. That's exactly what I needed, especially for the winter time when it was too cold to spend any time outside. That was another thing that I had trouble with, finding a quiet time and place to pray. I mean, I did get up earlier than my hubby, but I didn't have any place of quiet reverence in which I could commune with God. Typically, I'd go outside in the morning or at night to pray, but that was also my cigarette habit. For the time being, until I get past the horrid withdrawal period, I made the conscious decision to not do my whole outside in the morning and outside at night routine. It's helped a ton with the cravings, but I've also missed out on some crucial God time. What a cool idea this was. But the only problem was we didn't have any walk-in closets. We didn't have any closets, actually, other than a small clothes closet in our bedroom, and that wouldn't work. I briefly thought about my pantry, but that wasn't exactly a pretty, serene place to dedicate to prayer or worship. In all reality, though, was it the actual prayer closet my heart yearned for, or was it that special communing time with God? Then, what I saw next made me audibly gasp. In another one of my groups, a gal posted a photo of her newly remodeled she-shed office space. Yes, this was exactly what I wanted to do. We had a good-sized shed just like the one she had renovated that I wanted to convert to an office and podcasting studio. This woman had perfectly captured my vision for it. It was farmhouse chic with white shiplap walls, wooden shelves, and artwork of cows and chickens. Her husband had done it for her, even cutting out a window that was adorned with black and white buffalo check curtains and a wide windowsill for plants. She had a bookcase and a large table that functioned both as a desk and craft table. I sat back, gaping at it in awe. It was perfect. I wanted that so badly I could do nothing but stare. And, like many things that I tend to drool over, I took a screenshot, saving it for future inspiration. If I could have my own space outside, that would solve everything. All of my problems. Husbandly distractions, a space to pray and spend time with God, a quiet sanctuary to write and work where I could stay in the zone for hours, and a perfect spot to record my podcast episodes without interruption. The only thing I would need after that was... not kidding. In full honesty here, because I'm an honest person that does all things in truth going forward, what I saw further down in my feed suddenly felt way too much of a coincidence. In my local buy-sell trade group, someone had listed a relatively new MacBook Pro in excellent condition for $700. My first thought? That wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair that these simple things could impact my life so massively, and yet they were as unattainable for me as a trip to the moon. It was the first week of the month again, and although, thank God, we'd been able to pay most of our bills, we still had a few left and zero money in the bank. Once again, we were relying on God's manna to get us through. At any other time in my life, I would have snatched up that MacBook laptop with only a tiny dent in our bank account, easily affordable. In any other season, I would have bought the materials for my she shed office and found some local guy to help me renovate it. Everyone else was showing off things that I didn't have, but that I really, really wanted. Needed, actually. I wasn't sitting here pining for a brand new car or a bigger, newer home or a grand European vacation costing thousands of dollars. Was it too much to ask that I have these things in my life? With my earbuds in, I tried to pray on it. Christian worship music pumped through my ears. My husband's gregarious roaring laugh rang out in the background. I pushed back from my chair, grabbed a cinnamon toothpick and a piece of nicotine gum, and made my way to the back door, grabbing my coat and my Crocs. Even though we still have a good bit of snow outside, big patches have started to melt. I detest boots and almost always wear my Crocs when I go outside. A friend of ours gave me a pair of slip-on ice cleats that I put on over them so that I don't fall on ice or slippery patches of snow, so I donned those and stepped outside. Today, the sun was out in all its glory, and the sky was blue, and somehow we hit a miraculous high of 41 degrees. That's 5 degrees Celsius for all you non-Americans out there. Usually this time of year is bitterly cold, but it was beautiful out there, so I wandered around the yard in my Crocs and ice cleats, reflecting on all those things I saw on Facebook. It didn't take long for the Holy Spirit to direct my thoughts to the wise words of Pastor Craig Rochelle, who often says the phrase, "Where comparison begins, contentment ends." Yeah, it wasn't hard to understand that. It was one thing to feel frustrated by my lack of space, racking my brain for a solution to the problem, perhaps even engaging my hubby in a brainstorming discussion about how we could make things work better for both of us. I may not be able to get him to put things back where they belong or help him to see 5 inches from his face, but those were just minor inconveniences. More importantly, we could potentially set specific quiet time hours with no phone calls or conversations. Or if he needed to take a call, he could head outside. There were compromises that we both could implement as solutions to my issue. Yet, I realized that it wasn't until I went into social media that my frustrations and inconveniences turned into wild envy and deep discontentment. I didn't simply want solutions to my problems. I wanted what other people had. A hubby that spent the day away from the house at work. Enough space and rooms and closets to turn my cramped home into a functional space for every need, so that I could be fulfilled both physically and spiritually. My own renovated office space made just for me that would be all mine, no sharing. And a new computer where I could type on a laptop keyboard anytime, anywhere. desperately wanting what some other person had so casually thrown up for sale cheap on Marketplace. With these thoughts on my mind, I walked back into the house. My hubs was apparently done with his call because I didn't see him or hear him. I went into the living room, sighing as I plopped into my chair. My hubby was on the couch, apparently deep in his zone. I decided to turn the tables. I sighed again, louder this time. He finally glanced over at me and must have noticed the wife look that I had on my face. "Uh-oh," he said. "What did I do wrong now?" I smiled, but it wasn't one of those real smiles. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to say, so I just shrugged. "Are you still feeling bad cravings for cigarettes? It can't be that bad. It's been well over a week now. Withdrawals don't last that long." "No, it's not the cigarettes, although I really would like one right now. I just don't understand why things have to be so darn hard. Why? Why does everyone else seem to have the things that they take for granted, but that I would absolutely love to have and appreciate way more than they would?" He just looked at me, confused. "What? What do you mean? What things? Who has something that you would love to have?" I shook my head. "Never mind. It's just nothing. Nothing. It's nothing." I paused just long enough for him to begin typing again, but a moment later, I interrupted him a second time. "I mean, why can't you just take your phone calls outside? This is the first home that we've lived in where I didn't have my own home office space. It's too hard being right next to you. What if I get a job soon? I need to have my own space. You're too loud on the phone." What? Where's that coming from? We've been working this way for almost 4 years. Now you're just saying something? I always make sure to disappear when you have meetings. I mean, if you want me to go sit on the bed and work, I will. "No," I said, throwing up my arms. "I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, why are the simplest problems to solve sometimes the hardest ones?" He shook his head again. "Lady, if you weren't menopausal, I'd swear it was that time of the month. What are you even talking about? What simple problems? What is the issue here?" "Everything," I said, feeling frustrated. "Prayer closets and laptops and shiplap with bookshelves inside the shed. And a wife who sends her husband to work with a full day's worth of sandwiches and snacks, all packed in a lunchbox with a cute little 'I love you' note." Admittedly, I almost giggled at the absolute baffled look on his face then. I realized how ridiculous that must have sounded. Poor men. It's times like this when I really do feel badly for the husbands of the world. And that, my friends, was the perfect example of why God created Adam first, because it gave mankind the only opportunity to have some peace for a little while. Anyway, he just shook his head and went back to work. I think he knew better than to ask more questions, and I was thankful for that, because I didn't have the answers. I felt badly that I kind of snapped on him without any real reason why. For the remainder of that day, even though the sun was shining and it was a gorgeous warm February day, I couldn't seem to find my joy. I knew it was in there somewhere, but I also knew God wanted me to do some digging to find it. Later on in the evening, after the sun went down, I put on my ice cleat Crocs and coat and stepped outside. My intention was to go out there with a toothpick in my mouth and pray. Only I didn't pray. I just remained silent, wanting to hear God's voice. It wasn't one of those moments where I heard God speak to me in my heart or even give me a word. Instead, I had the smattering of words from a verse that niggled at the edges of my brain. It was a verse that I didn't know well, but I knew vaguely what it said, so I pulled out my phone to search for it. There it was, from James chapter 4, titled Drawing Closer to God. I'd come outside to seek his wisdom and counsel, and he had provided it. I had been feeling irritable and discontent in my spirit, and I knew it wasn't from the lack of nicotine or not smoking. It was something much deeper than that, and the verses he pointed me to cleared away the fog. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You're jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and you wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure. Yeah, well, while I might not have schemed and killed to get what I wanted that I didn't have, I couldn't deny that I was jealous, envious. They had things that I didn't have, and it made me feel insecure and less than. It did make me feel irritable and naggy toward my husband, and seeing lack instead of abundance. I thought again to Pastor Craig's words, "Where comparison begins, contentment ends." The Bible calls this sort of jealous, envious wanting of what other people have coveting. The Apostle Paul foretold in his letter to Timothy that people would only care about themselves and their stuff in the end times. I've read this to you all before as well, but it bears repeating. From 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will only love themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving, and they will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends and be reckless and be puffed up with pride and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. You know, I've talked a lot lately about hope and joy. I've shown you all the secret of giving your anxieties to God so that you don't have to manage them. But being envious of what other people have that you don't is a serious imbalance that most 21st century people, certainly most Americans, struggle with on a daily basis. Social media makes it so much worse. I've said that many times before as well. I mean, just look at the goofy trend of those Stanley Cups, where people, mostly women and teenage girls, stood in ridiculously long lines just to grab one. Fights broke out, mayhem ensued, all because masses of people needed to get their hands on the trendy cup that in some cases cost several $100s. Absolute insanity. I have this friend, my age, married with 2 preteen kids. I'm not super close with her, but we've been acquaintances for a while, and we're friends on Facebook. She and her husband are fairly well off, upper middle class. They have 2 newish cars, a really nice house, much larger than ours, and they just went on vacation to the Florida Keys back at Christmas. They take lots of trips around the country in the summer, sometimes taking their camper, other times renting Airbnb cabins. Their home is gorgeous. Perfectly matching furniture, trendy decor, a big beautiful kitchen with high-end appliances, one of those laundry rooms that you only see on Instagram or in magazines. They're considering moving out of Michigan to get out of the winters, and I saw a discussion that she was having with another mutual friend of ours. It was kind of voyeuristic, me reading their convo online, but in it, she was saying that she had her eye on a big, beautiful house that was 1,000 square feet larger than her current home, which in my mind was already really large. And she said something to the effect of, "Yeah, we just need a bigger house. We've got too much stuff." Oof, yikes, that makes me cringe a little bit. Because on one hand, the envy set in pretty quickly. Like, really? They have a really nice house that's already big, and I would give my left arm to have that house. They even have a pool. What I wouldn't give to have her closet space or her laundry room. And she thinks it's not big enough? Yeah, I'd take that house in a heartbeat. On the other hand, I thought of the parable that Jesus told about the man with the barns. I might have shared this before, but let me read it to you again. Because not only does this tell us there were materialistic people back in his day that only thought about their comfort and wealth, but it also shows us how relevant this story is today. This is called the parable of the rich fool from Luke chapter 12. Then someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all of my crops." Then he said, "I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything that you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Now, that is not saying that it's a bad thing to have a comfortable, secure life or to save up for retirement. You have to look closely at what Jesus is saying here. For one, the man was already rich. That meant he had a comfortable, secure life that was already blessed by God. Yet he was looking to add more to it, to grow bigger, richer, and have more abundance. Notice he didn't want to store all that excess so he could bless others with it, or give to the poor, or help those in need, or provide for those who are growing in God's kingdom. His main goal was to sit back, relax, and enjoy a leisurely life, eating and drinking and being merry. Or, in modern terms, playing golf, going on cruises, and collecting vintage wines to pair alongside fancy charcuterie boards in order to impress your friends. Let me reiterate that last line. A person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God that's generous toward his kingdom. I read some really interesting stats online recently. The average American household annual income is about $70,000 USD. If that's approximately what your household brings in each year, you are in the top 4% wealthiest demographic in the entire world. If you, as an individual, not household, earn at least $60,000 per year, you are in the top 1% of earners worldwide. Let that sink in. If you make more than 60 grand, you're in the top 1% wealthiest income earners across the globe. In this article, a study was done where they asked millions of people in poor countries all over the world what was the top thing that they considered the height of luxury. And by far, the number one answer was plumbing or a household toilet. Now, stop and think about that for a second. Would you ever consider a working toilet to be the height of luxury? Or rather, do you consider a toilet such a basic necessity that you never give it a second thought, taking indoor plumbing for granted? That's what they considered to be an out-of-reach luxury. A basic necessity for those poor communities would be clean drinking water. And yet, we have hordes of middle-aged women standing outside of Target at 3 a.m, getting into fist fights and pulling hair and screaming obscenities because they insist they need to get their hands on the $125 Stanley Cup that is no different than the $10 cup that I can buy at the dollar store. It holds water and it keeps it cold. Period. My 13-year-old niece had this as one of her 25 items on her Christmas list this year. 13? I mean, when I was 13, I don't even remember drinking water. Seriously. I mean, yeah, my generation jokes about drinking water out of the garden hose in the summer when it was hot, and that was totally true. But if we were in the house and we were thirsty, we kids drank from the shared drinking cup that sat on the sink, with water out of the faucet. As a young teenager, I never took water with me anywhere. I recall spending whole days playing with my cousins, or babysitting for hours, or going to school day after day without ever once considering that I needed to bring water with me. Teenagers today are the most hydrated human beings that ever walked this earth. I've seen mothers who even have subscriptions to delivery boxes for lemons and limes just to have fresh slices always available for their kids to put in their Stanley Cups. It's insane. We modern-day Americans live in this weird, warped bubble that insists the only way to have contentment, happiness, and fulfillment is to accumulate stuff, upgrade stuff, get bigger stuff, and then show off all that stuff. Bigger, better, newer, and more. Let me ask you this. If the whole purpose of our lives here on earth was to love God and love people and to build up our treasures in heaven that determine our eternal rewards, then how does envying what others have and being jealous of them when they have things that you don't have and consuming and purchasing piles of stuff to fill our homes and to show off on social media fulfill that purpose? Again, I'm not saying that it's totally wrong for me to want a new MacBook so that I can work more efficiently, or a remodeled shed for a private workspace and podcast studio. I'm not saying it's wrong for you to want a new car or a bigger home or a holiday vacation. Jesus is not telling us that we can't have those things. But when those things become idols in our lives that we cling to in order to fulfill some worldly definition of success, or when my desire for those things start making me crabby and irritable at my husband, or when we all look longingly at posts on social media, which, again, I hate for that very reason, or when we all start looking at the blessings God gave us as being insufficient or not good enough, then that turns gratitude into discontentment. We don't feel content with our lot, and we certainly don't feel grateful. How much joy or hope do you think would overflow in me if I constantly set my mind on the things I don't have rather than the things I do? Do you know what I have? I have the amazing blessing of being able to spend an unheard of amount of time with my spouse, enjoying every moment with him. Before we bought this place, we lived in a different town in a rental home. The neighboring house was a couple of acres away from us, down on the corner. It sat empty for about a year when finally a couple moved in. They were in their early 60s and had just retired. For privacy's sake, I'll call them Chris and Denise. Chris and Denise had just retired and moved up from Detroit. He worked for one of the auto factories and she had been a bartender. They were the coolest people. We watched them completely transform that modest little house into a perfect retirement home. We could not have asked for better neighbors. They had been vacationing to that area for years, and they were so thrilled to finally reap the rewards of all their decades of hard work. It was now time for them to enjoy the woods and the water and the grandkids and their paradise. For about 2 years, we watched those two lovebirds driving around in their golf cart and enjoying bonfires and swimming in the lake and grinning like two kids who had just won the lotto. That was the life that they had imagined together, with all the free time in the world to enjoy it. Then, Denise went to the doctor for some stomach and digestive issues that she was having. The test results stunned us all. Stage 4 colon cancer. The ending to their story is too tragic to relay in detail. It's just going to make me choke up. She didn't even make it a full year from her diagnosis. Her death left everyone shell-shocked, most of all her husband. They had worked their whole lives, saved up everything, poured their savings into buying and remodeling their dream retirement home, and they barely got to enjoy 2 years of it together. That was back in 2019. We're still friends with Chris to this day. In fact, he was just over our place the other day. We let him hunt on our property back in the fall, and he's doing okay, hanging in there, but it's hard not to look at him and think about all that he'd lost. Not just his wife, but his dreams and plans. Friends, life is way too short. In the parable that Jesus told, he makes it clear that none of us know what tomorrow brings. I remember looking over at Chris and Denise with envy, watching them create their home into their own little slice of heaven, having all the free time in the world to play and enjoy each other. Yet now, I can say with pretty good certainty that working from home side by side with my hubby 24 hours a day, we've spent more time with each other than they did collectively. Life is not about stuff, and it's not measured by how much money you make or how much you save up or how much you own. Your life is literally measured by how much you love and how much you give and how much you praise God. Think about that this week, my dear listeners. Paul says in 1 Timothy 6, verses 7 and 8, "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income." And Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, verse 15, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." God bless you all. Stay safe, and I'll see you again next Sunday.
Like